Hello, it's me, and this is going to be a very quick one because I've literally just written this one, and I can't be bothered. I realised that I don't often get the opportunity anymore to really record these very often, and not that I don't actually have that many ideas anymore because I'm not as depressed, and when I was depressed I spent a lot of time ruminating, and now I don't do that so much. So here we go.
Alright, so basically, I was thinking about this thing, right? And I'm going to read it like in a kind of posh voice, because that might make it more like comprehensible and shit. Okay. I think consciousness almost certainly is an emergent property ... of the brain. Now this would go some way to explaining some of the findings of split brain studies. Now I've spoken before of how I believe different species and even different individuals of the same species can be more or less conscious than others. I think I gave the example of someone who has had part of their brain destroyed and can only say the word cheese, and all they think about is cheese. It's probably less conscious than others. And also, I think the animals that we eat are probably less conscious than we are. It doesn't mean that, their suffering isn't a concern. It is. It's just more. It's less pressing than if we were eating other humans. Okay, or if we were farming other humans. Here we go. I would say each side of a split brain patient is more or less half as conscious as the previous whole brain patient. So when you split the brain, you don't quite perfectly halve the consciousness. I think one side is probably more conscious than the other side. Well, makes up more of the consciousness. And it's also the whole patient consciousness would probably be a kind of gestalt, so greater than some of its parts. Each individual split consciousness is probably less conscious. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe when you split it, you less than halve it, so you get two parts which are actually greater than half of the original. I don't know. This emergent consciousness would not necessarily transfer to non-neurological entities, such as ant colonies or inhabited planets, even though ant colonies are an example of an emergent thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ant colony as a whole would be conscious in the same way that a human is. It might not necessarily have a subjective experience, which is what I'm using as my main definition for consciousness. If it were the case, we might expect to see some form of communication between the levels of consciousness. And when I was talking about a planet, I was thinking about how each of... I think I'm going to it now anyway. Well, I know I do. I just wrote it down. Although this is perhaps the only idea of an air quotes God I could get behind... sorry, I read that in the wrong tone. Although this is perhaps the only idea of an air quotes God I could get behind, if each individual human were equivalent to a neuron in the brain, and interaction between those humans gave rise to some form of consciousness made up of all the humans as a whole, then perhaps there would be an evolutionary advantage for both the individual humans' consciousness and the emergent consciousness of the collective, if they were to behave in some of the ways the traditional God idea would encourage them to. Okay, well, that was quite a long sentence there. Really, it's probably quite hard to understand, but luckily I kind of understand it. Let's see. I have spoken about this before. What if, you get thingies of scale, and then that turned out that that was already an idea called emergence. I learned a little bit about emergence. So what if we, as individuals, much like neurons, if we were able to shrink to the scale of a neuron, we can't really understand what a neuron's doing. But what if we act like neurons, creating a brain out of all of our... When we interact with another human, we are sending information and gathering information back from it, and we're like a more complex neuron, because the neuron just fires and sends information and gets it back. Well, sends information in the form of electricity. We're just sending information in the form of what we call information. Language, body language, subliminal things, all that would obviously be a bit less binary than a neuron is. Even though I don't think neurons are entirely binary because of their different neurotransmitters, so they're probably like tertiary or something. That's not the right word, but Anywho, so yeah, that's just the only possible definition of God that might make sense. It's obviously not something supernatural. It would just be the recognition that behaving in sort of not charitable, but what's the word? Not sympathetic, not empathetic. Bloody working in harmony with other ones would be in the best interest of this higher consciousness if it existed. Which might, I don't know, that doesn't necessarily suggest that doesn't mean it's suggest that it does exist, because it would be there, because it would also, you could make up all kinds of shit, it would, but I'm trying to work ground up, and then it sounds like I'm switching to top down. But anyway, managed to get 5 minutes out of that. Good God, what a moron! What a fucking moron! Oh man, I wish I could just get in my own brain there and talk normally. Let's see. Let's slow it down a second. Think about this. Yeah. Oh God, I just look. There could be at least two levels of consciousness there, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be conscious, but it would just be a kind of system that would benefit if the individual components of the system worked in harmony with one another. Oh God, that sounds so fucking gay, and no, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not gay, nothing's wrong with being gay, it's just the word gay came to mind when I was thinking of, it's like language barrier. God, what's a good way to put this here? Let's just get rid of the air quotes God thing, because you can only get misinterpret it, really. Let's change it to because if you use the air quotes God, it's kind of like you're just trying to appease the religious people into being sympathetic to your view somehow. That's not really the reason I'm doing it. It's just okay, it might be. Let's see. Let's change it to I quite like system. I quite like the word system. I think that kind of captures it quite well. So yeah, we kind of form an ecological and ethological system, if that works. I don't actually, is that a word, ethological? Because what I'm trying to turn it into would be ethicological system. There we go. And maybe that's why the idea of God evolved. Maybe not really, probably not. But I think I quite liked Darren Brown's idea of how God evolved. I can't quite remember it well enough to explain it, but I just remember it being a good one. It was just the idea of help keep people in check, kind of, I think. So yeah, it's kind of the same idea, really. But I liked the thought because of the possibility of it maybe explaining some of the split brain observations. So yeah, that'll do. Donkey, that'll do. Little donkey, that'll do. Little donkey,